Hello my friends, welcome back to my channel. Today I have some age gap romance recommendations for you. So age gap romances is a very popular trope, and I agree. I think they're super fun. They're usually very angsty, they're usually very forbidden. Like, I love them too. And I think that we all know, if you've been reading romance for any time at all, you all know the ones that usually get brought up. And I may have a few of those in here. But I have also tried to bring in some other ones that maybe you haven't heard of, hopefully. And if not, that's okay, because these are my personal favorite age gap romances. So let's go ahead and get started. So the first three books that I have on my list are actually older woman, younger man age gap. And I feel like that age dynamic is a little bit more difficult to find where it's done really well, so we're going to start with those. So the first one that I have on my list is Waiting for a Scot Like You by Ava Leigh. This is a historical romance with a widowed heroine who is in her 40s. She has recently been widowed. Her husband really kept her sort of under his thumb, didn't give her a lot of freedom. She has raised her children, they're grown and moved out. Her husband passed away, and she has decided that she's going to live a life full of passion and enjoyment and take happiness wherever she can find it. And she says that it is time to go to an orgy. So she is going to journey to an orgy, and she meets some of her friends who are like, I don't think that we really want you to travel there by yourself, so allow us to let Sergeant Duncan McCameron to escort you to your pleasure trip. And Duncan McCameron is a younger man than she is. He has been in the war, and he is very broody, sort of grunty. He's just your very typical Scottish hero that we love and adore, but he is also very tender and soft, and he wants to have a wife and a family so badly. And he is initially very attracted to our heroine, but he also, as time goes on, he realizes that his feelings for her aren't just attraction, they are more deep and they are loving as well. And he starts to get a little bit afraid that she doesn't return those feelings for him, because she has said several times that she's not interested in love, she's not interested in settling down, she wants to just take her pleasure as she finds it because it has been denied her for so long. So this is also like a road trip romance. We have a lot of really fun tropes in here. We have only one bed. It is just such a fun book, and if you are looking for an older woman, younger man romance, I put this at the top of my list for a reason. It's probably my favorite in that trope. I just think it's perfectly well done. It's so fun. It's so sexy. It's so swoony. I just love this, and I love this couple so much. So I would highly recommend this if you are looking for that type of an age gap. Okay, and the next book that I have to recommend that is also an older woman, younger man is His Muse by Twyla Turner. This book is so completely beautiful. I fell in love with this couple. It was so powerfully beautiful. I just loved it so very much. So this book is a contemporary romance, and this book we have our heroine, Taryn, who is also recently divorced. Her husband left her for a younger woman, had an affair, and she also has recently raised her daughter. Her daughter is in college, and she has decided that it is time to live her life for her. And so she takes the trip to Paris, where she's going to start up a business as a tour guide or a travel agency for other Black women who are looking to travel and tour Paris. And she is very successful. But when she first arrives in Paris, she goes to a gallery showing one night where she meets our hero Etienne, who is an artist. His paintings are on the wall, and they are of these beautiful nude Black women, and she is just awestruck by his talent. He, of course, sees her and is immediately struck with her beauty and her grace, and he approaches her, and they start talking, and they have just this deep and powerful connection. Like, right off the bat, you can just tell that there is something special about their first meeting. It is so beautiful. I love it so much. This book is very passionate. It is very much, there's so much in here where Etienne is just overwhelmed with her beauty and her lush figure and everything about her, that she kind of feels like she's past her prime, like she's not a 20-year-old woman anymore, and she kind of questions herself as to why he would maybe be attracted to her, because Etienne is a beautiful specimen of a young man. He, I think, is 28 and she is 40, in her 40s. But she eventually does decide that he really does want her and desire her for who she is. And their love story is just so beautiful and compelling. Like, I just was in love. I was in love with their romance. I was so invested. I could not stop reading it. There is a third act conflict that might make you doubt if an HEA is in this, but let me assure you that any book that I recommend as a romance will have a happily ever after. So there is a happily ever after in here. It is so completely beautiful. I just love and adore watching their romance, watching their journey, watching Taryn really step into herself and grow confident and open herself up to the love that Etienne so freely wants to give her. It was just so beautiful, and I loved this book so much. Okay, the next book that I have to recommend is also an older woman, younger man, and it is That Kind of Guy by Talia Hibbert. This is an indie published book. It is a contemporary romance, and I just completely adored this book. It was so sweet, and it was so beautiful. And the romance was just so all-consuming. I just loved it so much. I will say that if you have read Talia Hibbert's newer books, if you have read her Brown Sister series, I would highly recommend this series too, because it has that same polished, really swoony, really steamy feel that the Brown Sisters has, and it was just so enjoyable. So this book follows Ray, our heroine, who is 40, and she is also recently divorced. Her husband left her for a younger woman, and she's really kind of struggling with that. She is a writer, and she recently wrote a book that won an award, and her husband was sort of involved in the process too. So she's invited to an awards night, and she's really nervous about going there because she knows her husband will be there, and she doesn't want to run into him being single and have to see his new young wife. And it's something she doesn't want to do. Like, I can imagine that would be terrible. So she has a neighbor who is very close friends with her named Zach, who is 28. And he and Ray are so close. They have a great friendship. They have a lot of just great, of good vibe. They have good feelings towards one another. And Zach is a demisexual character, and he has, in his past, just sort of had physical interactions with other people and has left those feeling very unfulfilled. So he has decided, or he realized, once he realized he was demisexual, he realized that he would be waiting to have any further physical relationships with people until he had a very strong emotional connection with them. So when he is approached by Ray to sort of fake date and be her date at this awards night, he's a little bit nervous because he realizes that he has feelings for her that are deeper than just a friend, because he is starting to feel very attracted to her and very overwhelmed with the power of his attraction towards her. This book was so completely beautiful. This also has chronic illness rep because Ray has POTS, which affects how her blood pressure and how her heart beats, and that is a very basic description of it, I know, I'm sorry. But this book was just so beautiful and lovely and soft. Zach is a wonderfully swoony cinnamon roll hero, and I loved their romance so much, and I would definitely recommend this. This was also a pretty quick read, so if you're looking for something that's maybe a little bit shorter, would definitely recommend this one. Okay, the next book that I have to recommend is Daddy Crush by A. Anders. This is a younger woman, older man trope, and this is a fun little novella. It's very short, but I really enjoyed it. I loved the chemistry between this couple. We have Carl, who is our hero, who owns a bar, and he lives in this apartment complex so he's sort of next door neighbors with our heroine, Jerusha. Jerusha is a young woman, and she has just recently left her very sheltered and sort of a life that was very driven by purity culture, and she really is very virginal and doesn't know anything about, like, sexual relationships with men and women. And so she starts dating people, and one night there is a date who walks her to her door and will not take no for an answer at not being invited in. Carl oversees this, comes to the rescue, kicks him out, and protects Jerusha. And they were already sort of a little bit friends, but once they had that encounter, they both, like, Jerusha starts to realize that she is very attracted to Carl and has feelings for him, and Carl is starting to realize that he has feelings for Jerusha that are not exactly only friendly. So this is a very short, very passionate book, and I really enjoyed it. It was just a lot of fun, and Carl was such a soft, sweet hero. I really loved him. Okay, the next book that I have to recommend is Ruthless Stranger by Maggie Cole. This is also a contemporary romance. So this is a mafia romance, and it was absolutely absolutely fun and delicious. I loved it so much. This book follows Maxime, our hero, who is 48. He is very much a stern brunch daddy, and he overhears in Vegas this group of women who are talking about Aspen, our heroine, who is recently divorced. Her husband really used and abused her as far as taking advantage of her money and working, and has kind of left her really shook up and very unsatisfied. So this group of women that Aspen is there in Vegas with are talking. They're trying to get her on board with having just one night in Vegas with a guy. And Aspen is like, no, I can't do that. I really can't do that. So these women are like, well, what if he was blindfolded and you wouldn't know who he was and you never would have to see him again? And Maxime, our hero, overhears that, and his interest is piqued. He is very intrigued with Aspen, and he approaches the group of women and says, hey, I would be on board with that. So they end up having one very passionate night that is unforgettable for both of them. Circumstances happen in their lives, and they are in a situation where they both are face to face, and they recognize each other through their voice and other things like that. And their attraction is so immense that they cannot be kept apart. This book was so good. I loved it so much. It was very swoony. It was very steamy. This hero is just out of his mind, head over heels in love with this woman. He is very protective. He is very loving. He is very tender, but he is also very alpha, and I just really enjoyed this book. It was great. Okay, the next book that I have to recommend is Hookshot by Kennedy Ryan. You knew that if I could squeeze a Kennedy Ryan book in here that I would. So the age gap in here isn't necessarily very pronounced, other than Keenan, our hero, is older for being a basketball star, and he's sometimes teased about being the old man and how much longer is he going to be able to play and all that other stuff. This is another contemporary romance. This is book 3 in her Hoop series, but they are all standalones. You don't need to read them in order. Keenan is the hero. He's recently divorced from his wife who cheated on him. He has a teenage daughter, and he's really struggling and trying to be a good dad and overcome the real grief and heartache that he suffered when his wife cheated on him. He ends up meeting Lotus and is just completely bowled over by her beauty and her presence, and he wants to be a part of her life, and like more than just friends. They meet in Long Shot, the first book, but they don't actually come together until Hookshot. So in this book, Lotus is very wary of having a relationship with Keenan. She doesn't really want to have a full-on physical or a full-on emotional relationship. She wants to just keep him as a friend. But of course, they cannot deny their passion, and it is just a glorious thing to behold. Keenan, again, is a wonderful hero. He's one of my favorite heroes that Kennedy Ryan has ever written. He's very protective. He is so tender and sweet with Lotus, and he is just fantastic, and I adore this book, and I love their love story. Okay, and the next book is Lord of Darkness by Elizabeth Hoyt. This is part of her Maiden Lane series, but you could read this as a standalone for sure. Now, this is an older man, younger woman, which isn't necessarily unheard of in historical romances. That's a fairly common thing that happens, where you have a very young heroine and an older man hero, but it was mentioned several times in here that he was a bit of a silver fox, even though he was only like 38, but he was a silver fox in here, and she was very young, like in her probably early 20s, and that added a little bit of a dynamic to their relationship. This book is a historical romance. They both have lost loved ones. So he is a widower, and she has lost who she hoped would be her fiance. And so they're both sort of dealing with their grief, and this was really a beautiful story of these two who have an arranged marriage and who are trying to make this marriage work into something that is a relationship of love and respect and passion while they're still grieving and trying to overcome the losses in their life. It was really beautiful. I thought it was really well done, and I think that this is one of the few historicals that I've read where the age gap was a standout, but it was also just so complex and delicious, and I just really enjoyed this one. Alright, and now we have 2 fan favorites, which if you have read any age gaps at all, you've probably heard these, but I'm going to include them because they are some of my personal favorites. And one of those is Culty by Mariana Zapata. This is a sports romance where we have our heroine, who is a soccer star, who is a high-performing athlete. She is training for her upcoming season, and she is shocked and stunned and amazed to see Rainier Culty, who is this international soccer star, where she had his posters in her room, like she was obsessed with him, like fangirl status. he is now her team's coach. This is also a little bit of an enemies to lovers. They definitely have an antagonistic relationship when she meets him and she realizes that he's not as great as she thought he was. He's very gruff, he's very stern, and this is definitely a slow burn, but when we get their romance and we watch this stern man just completely crumble and melt for the heroine, it was just a thing of beauty and I loved it so much. So this is a classic age gap, but if you haven't read it yet, highly recommend this one. It is so good. Okay, and then the final one, the grand dame, the big daddy of all age gap romances, is Birthday Girl by Penelope Douglas. I only recently read this year. I fell in love with it. It is now one of my favorite books, and I get the hype. This book is age gap with our heroine who is she's engaged to her boyfriend. They're in some real financial struggles. She ends up going to the movies alone one night when her deadbeat boyfriend kind of just ditched her. And she meets Pike there, and he is an older man. They have this really great connection in the movie theater, but nothing happens. There's no cheating. There's no cheating in this book. But they have this connection where they have these feelings, and she's very conflicted about this. So she ends up going home to her boyfriend, and they have decided that in order to get out of this financial bind they're going to move in with her boyfriend's dad. So they move in, and guess who the dad is? It's Pike. It's so good. This is honestly so delightful. Pike pines for her so much. I adore their romance. It was fantastic. If you haven't read this yet, please read it because it's so good. I love it so much. Okay. There you have it. Those are my age gap romance recommendations. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you have any age gap romances you'd like to share with me, please leave them down below. And if you just want to leave me an emoji and show me your support, I would love it if you left any color of heart that you would desire. Thank you so much for watching, my friends. I'll see you in my next video.